This video was sponsored by Skillshare. Doctor Who in 2008 was running at full steam. Everybody's favourite writer of the show was back for another double episode story, ready for a frightening, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey adventure that would shake the viewer to the core. The second half of Series 4 is renowned for its critical success, which is what excites me the most about the next 3 reviews I'll be concocting. Episodes I have such fond memories of, which truly instantiated this idea of hiding behind the sofa into the young and impressionable mind of Doctor Who's biggest fan, me. The key quality in these episodes, though, is the writing. Regardless of all other factors, definitively no series of the show has reached such heights since the late Davies period. It makes me wonder whether Moffat and Davies honed their craft by watching creative classes on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for curious and creative people. I've personally found Simon Van Boy's class titled The Writer's Toolkit: 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit very beneficial for me when it comes to writing scripts for these videos. I even changed around my home workstation to be more aesthetically pleasing and inspiring, so writing is no longer a chore but something I look forward to instead. It's not just handy for writers and content creators though. If you're into filmmaking, artistry, cooking, music, photography, animation, graphic design, it's definitely worth investigating. The value of a membership is pretty astounding. You don't get first-hand advice from established writers for £7 a month anywhere else, and the first 1,000 of you to click the link in the description will get 2 months of Skillshare Premium for free. So click the link below and start exploring your creativity today. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Moffat begins his second double bill story by alluding to the imagination. A child floating above the library in a dreamlike state, observed by this Dr. Moon character, seemingly a psychiatrist for a troubled child with a vivid imagination. It's quite the simple concept to get one's head around. There are 2 locations, one imaginary, one real. However, this concept of reality gets turned on its head as soon as the Doctor and Donna, the 2 characters we believe to be real, barge into the room. The concept of reality is thrown to the wind in this episode just from this opening scene. Forget time travel and distant planets, how on earth did our protagonists get inside a child's mind? In a way, this episode shares a lot of similarities with The Matrix, especially in the way it handles concepts like virtual reality. Dr. Moon acts firstly as a narrator that guides and informs our protagonists through the maze that is reality. He initially keeps Cal's eyes closed to the genuine reality, and then by the end of the episode reverts this axiom, not for the sake of the child's stability, but to protect the people in the library.
Books! People never really stop loving books.
Couldn't agree more, Doc, especially a fresh new one. You can tell from the flavour of humour in the dialogue that this story has come from a highly proficient writer. I found it astounding to hear the Doctor's descriptions of future book digestion, especially because I'm an avid Kindle and Audible user myself. Even in 2020, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine something like Audible being comparable to direct-to-brain downloads. Hey Audible, sponsor my videos already. The constant mentioning of spoilers throughout this story is practically iconic at this point. Maybe this word was coined before these 2 episodes aired, but if I had to guess the origin of things like spoiler warnings in culture, it would be from these 2 episodes of Doctor Who. How this concept is integrated into the story itself shows such profound understanding of storytelling both as a writer and reader that you can't help but bask in the display of intelligence that flows throughout the script, especially in the irony of our protagonists being time travelers. The special effects in this episode are gorgeous and applied in moderation. It's not flashy at all, yet the lack of accompanying dramatic score gives off this really eerie feeling. Maybe somebody's forcing the members and visitors into silence. The pair return to where they arrived, where we see this gorgeous shot of an atrium. These contrasting sunlight beams protruding the darkness beckons the the idea of casting out shadows visually before the danger has even been established. Being introduced to this librarian, a creepy robot with a human face, boggles the mind as to how they would have filmed this. It's so weird. As the message is read, the camera pulls right in so we get a full view of our characters' worried faces, and the impassive tone of this machine that's had the message filtered due to its horrific nature.
They're here. Arg, slug, snick. Message ends.
It's almost funny to hear, but it's sinister too, as it warns of counting shadows, and we see the room from afar once again. It's such an absurd suggestion, counting shadows, as they are merely the absence of light, not something physical, yet now that protruding sunlight doesn't seem so comforting after all. The final shot displays the slowly obscuring silhouettes of books, which will become more important later in the episode. Another aspect of this story which displays its iconicity is when they establish the sonic screwdriver doesn't work on wood. This was a really nice limitation to the one device that never fails to get them out of trouble, and Donna's reaction to this slight hiccup was absolutely hilarious. We then come full circle as the pair find the girl from the beginning, who seemingly transforms into a quaffle. We see a lovely shot of the ceiling too, surrounded by shadowy darkness, with a similar vignetting effect shown later in the scene to match. We see more of those simple but powerful special effects as a shadow is cast upon the floor seemingly out of nowhere. Akin to the Weeping Angels, we don't see shadows move, but for the sake of literary flavour, they do move as the earth spins on its axis.
I'm thick! So thick! Look at me, I'm old and thick! And so's your dad. I need a bigger head!
Your wish is my command.
Repetition is certainly not for everyone, but the way it's utilised in this episode gives off a really mimetic and childlike quality that makes each mantra memorable and chilling to the bone. Not only was this demonstrated earlier by having the Doctor and Donna show up twice, but the robots chants this phrase.
Reminder, the library has been breached. Others are coming. Reminder, the library has been breached. Others are coming.
This repetition will be utilised in the most horrific ways when the characters start getting picked off, but now I'm getting ahead of myself. This little entrance of the archaeologists was fantastic. This might just be a little bit of trivia here, but I swear the archaeologists' suits have computer fan grates attached to the back of them.
Hello, sweetie.
Get out.
I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I thought it was interesting that Anita, the last of the crew to die, would be the last one to take off her helmet and the first to nearly get consumed by the shadows. A young Steve Pemberton shows up as the funder of this expedition, which was a nice casting decision too. Coincidentally, the one episode Reece Shearsmith showed up in 7 years later was one of the worst received episodes in the show's history. Elon Musk's ex-wife, Ms. Evangelista, is then brought forward, and the moment when Donna and the Doctor ripped up the contracts was hilarious. You wind up feeling bad for how totally purposeless she is, accompanied by how none of them realise they're singling her out and almost bullying her. It makes you wonder why exactly she's there in the first place, but this will make her death that much more significant as it reflects badly on the crew at large. This episode's monster then gets named Vashta Nerada, with this lovely sound effect acting as a motif for this shadowy creature. If we wanted to get all etymological about this, the term could originate from southeastern regions of Europe. The term in Bulgarian roughly translates to your people. Google Translate is way off according to a native speaker I consulted on this. Or it could be closer to the ancient Hindu or Farsi terms relating to life and the giver of knowledge. My best guess though is that Moffat just made it up and thought it sounded great coming out of Tennant's mouth. Honestly, these episodes are so great to watch knowing River's arc has now been completed. She's absolutely loving how this all played out, despite knowing this is her last adventure with the Doctor. Donna's reactions to the pair were great as well, especially as she's been wedged into the middle of this monumental event in space and time that's about to take place. Moffat also sets up the stories involving River Song in his own series to come when she starts going through her diary. It certainly feels a bit cocky for him to do this, this, but again, the hindsight factor works wonderfully in this story's favour. Death-defying escapes and dates in space are still to come, followed by this genuine astonishment on River's face and unflinching stoic close-ups on the Doctor's face, which is the important factor at work here. These faces are not ones either of them recognise, and these profile shots would be familiar to anyone who's watched anything slightly romantic on TV before. It really is not often we see the Doctor so totally void of information, especially regarding someone who will have such an impact on his life later on. The tragedy of it all is what bites the most in this scene, with the music flourishing for the highest emotional impact. The gang then started reconnecting with Cal, as she mysteriously is the only one that can hear the phone ringing. The moment we see them all on the TV was sheer genius. We not only get this hilariously placed jump scare thrown in right here, but then seeing all the books getting thrown about honours the insistence that the real and the virtual must be kept separate. The moment the protagonists actually have a conversation about what happened in the library 100 years ago, Ms. Evangelista wanders off.
Hey, a secret door!
This tilted angle of the camera immediately puts the viewer in a disorienting position, walking through shadows and entering a room lit in a very similar fashion to the atrium we saw at the beginning. This room, however, is really unnerving to me because I've never been to a library with a room laid like this before. Maybe I've just not been in enough libraries in my time, but how on earth could somebody study or read in this throne-like chair that's positioned so oddly in the middle of the room? Once again, the shot shows silhouettes of books consuming roughly half the frame, which eventually moves until it completely envelops this poor innocent character. It's such a fantastic shot, accompanied by some great sound design, with the music fading out and then a piercing scream that wakes our protagonists from their deep thinking slumber. From here, one of the most disturbing scenes in Who history takes place, and it had been building up to it stupendously. The way that humans are dealing with death in the 51st century is so alien to us. Humans being saved as strings of data and then having their faces plastered onto statues, and now we see their clothes having the ability to retain their life for an extra minute or even a whole day. Even books themselves are versions of this idea of extending the human lifespan. They keep people's feelings alive, which is exactly what happens in this scene. The Doctor's footprint on the beach comparison was just beautiful, and seeing the corpse in its entirety at the exact tilted angle we saw earlier, and then the childlike repetition starts up again, and it sent shivers down my spine watching the camera ascend hauntingly to the ceiling as though hanging from a rope. The scene ends with another haunting movement to the right. Instead of a silhouette, however, it moves into wood, with the light reflecting off it, and I thought this was a really nice touch, seeing as the Doctor is literally and verbally about to shed light on what is causing such nightmarish scenarios in the library. More of those wonderfully simplistic special effects come into play here, watching a chicken salad get turned into bone. These images are so starkly planted in my memory. It's a testament to how terrifying this antagonist is, because in a weird way they could just be symbolic of death. It's also the way the Doctor talks them up in the closing moments of the episode with such vibrant language.
An eating swarm, the piranhas of the air, literally the shadows that melt the flesh, the dust in sunbeams. You stay absolutely still, like there's a wasp in the room. Like there's a million wasps.
It's the fact you have to imagine these things that makes it so scary. God, H.P. Lovecraft would be proud. Even the solution to defeating them, running, is scary, but also rather easy. This is the show that makes running a solution all the time, but it's the moment the Doctor says his famous catchphrase,
I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
that we know it's too late.
Wait, you've got two shadows.
And then it clicks in the memory.
Count the shadows.
It's absolute brilliance. That tilted angle shows up once again to intensify the moment, and Donna's failed teleportation is just so frightening. Everything is happening so flipping fast that the panic is induced into the viewer now as well as the characters. To top everything off, and this definitely made me feel jittery, the sound effects we hear throughout are just so surreal. Obviously the score does a tremendous job too, but you hear rustles, wind, something like a swarm of moths batting their wings. Even Donna's scream gets distorted, and it's best heard in headphones if you want to experience it yourself, as it moves from left to right speaker as though she's being pulled apart. We then get the smallest of breathers, thinking that all is safe, but then...
Hey, who turned out the lights?
An observant viewer will know it's happened before they even confirm it, and the repeating mantras start up again. It's so dread-inducing. The skull in the black visor, the expanding shadows, it's all horrifying stuff. Best of all though is that all those bar Dave are still technically skeletons in suits, so trying to differentiate the living from the dead is going to be a mind-bending mission on its own. Fortunately, River has a squareness gun up her sleeve, another brilliant Moffat invention, yet for some reason didn't seal the gap up after they'd all crawled through it. Alternatively, you could see this as another testament to how well written this episode is. It's probably another gift from the future Doctor, but then again, this is the 51st century. God, we're going around in circles looking for one plot hole. What's the use? I bloody love this adventure. That final scene, my God, how the camera just snapped down this corridor gives us a synecdoche of the sheer size of the library. What we see in this 17-second long shot goes on for miles and miles and miles. A whole planet's worth of bookshelves. God almighty. And the lighting too, holy crap. Those beams of light we saw earlier are now cleaving these gaps in two. Half in shadow, half in light. This mirrors the white of Donna now as a statue, chanting, and Dave's blackened visor, also chanting, both repeating their mantras that will be remembered for years to come. This story has just thrown companion plot immunity to the wind right here, and I think this is what makes this cliffhanger so memorable too. The stakes have never been higher, as even fearless River has the true face of fear. Maybe the reason she doesn't know Donna, or why she doesn't appear in the Doctor's future, was because she died right here in the library. But we all know that's a load of baloney. Moffat starts part 2 by pointing the camera back at us, the viewer. He clearly knows how overly attached we get towards this show by having Cal react to the TV alongside this eye-rolling parent. Intriguingly, we catch a glimpse of her flicking through different angles of the library, a precursor to the machine's ability to skip through time like a film editor does with footage. This connection between how we consume television and virtual reality is really quite something to behold. The music heard as Cal watches Donna come out of the ambulance sounds like that of what you'd hear in a period piece. If we think about the reality that Cal inhabits, the 51st century, and the one Donna came from, the 21st, it seems fitting that this computer-generated TV show of Donna's virtual reality would be reminiscent of a time long forgotten. As with the end of Silence, everything is happening so quickly that before we know it, Donna has gotten married again, this time to a stuttering Lee Mack. Back in the library, the weirdness of the situation starts to become apparent as even the score has had these wibbly-wobbly reversed piano sound effects, not too dissimilar from those heard in Blink, added too. It's cool that you'll hear stings from that very episode score pop up from time to time in both of these episodes. The Vashta Nerada are closing in, and it's shown beautifully by this shot of the ceiling, the circle shrinking and getting slowly enveloped by darkness. I loved how red this room was as well. The threat to our characters is shown in really creative ways. Ironically enough, Mr. Lux figures out exactly what's going on here, something both the audience and the Doctor won't figure out for some time. We're bombarded by one mystery after the other, and with the music swelling when River whispers the Doctor's name into his ear, I just get goosebumps every time. It's the pair's performances that really knock this moment out of the ballpark, with the Doctor totally dumbfounded by what he has just heard, and then springing the scene back into life with his usual energy and drive to put the progression back on course. It was great that, like at the start of Silence, we have the same event from two points of view, one in reality and one in virtual. After Anita finds herself with two shadows, River does a head count of 5 people. Now, you know I said earlier about it being hard to differentiate between the living and the dead because of all their suits looking the same? Well, by thunder they use this tactic to their advantage in this scene. The Doctor actually sees the 6th person in the group before we do in this reaction shot, and then after Other Dave steps backward, the additional suit is seen. It's so flipping subtle and shoots fear directly at the viewer. The Doctor then establishes the baddies aren't invaders but were in fact born here. This certainly makes for an interesting concept, seeing as books are made of wood, and there's probably enough wood here to make a forest in itself. It's some very clever wordplay, but it's taken to another spooky level as both Dave and Other Dave attempt to surround the Doctor. The repetition of their mantras once again make for a great moment, which the Doctor escapes from rather conveniently.
Want to know the only reason I'm still alive? Always stay near the door.
Don't stand him against the lid.
Thankfully, the convenience is redeemed by Cal's response to the absurdity of it all, and the fact Moffat treats this moment with a healthy sense of humour prevents this story from being unbearably miserable. Flicking to another channel, it's just so incredible to watch Donna question something that is generally left unspoken in TV shows. How whole hours, days, weeks, or even years can go by thanks to the editor's invisible hand. Story-wise, I think the computer is just trying to create habitable existences for the people it's rescued. The only information it has to go on, however, are the pieces of media we create for entertainment, believing this is how humans genuinely exist. To a human, this is disorienting and strange, yet we have no trouble adjusting to it when we spend countless hours in front of the TV. The exposure of this perceived lunacy is projected through what remains of Ms. Evangelista, essentially cramming the red pill down Donna's throat. At first, the outfit would give off 2 impressions, that of a witch trying to trick Donna, but also caked in black like what somebody would wear at a funeral. How defensive Donna gets towards the virtual life that was built up for her, the belief in her reality constructed by Dr. Moon, and that familiar tilted angle provides a stark reminder of death that surrounds our characters. With such a brilliant use of those minimal special effects to show a playground covered in the same 2 children, the sound of rusty metal grinding and children laughing escalating until BANG! It's the Elephant Man all over again. This moment just defines perfection for me. Screams fly left and right in the speakers, just like when Donna was saved, and even Cal is now framed in that familiar tilted angle.
Not my Doctor.
I can't believe a bunch of people on Twitter took that quote out of context. People getting all mad about Jodie should just look at this shot right here of Miss Distortalista and realise it's just a TV show. I do love this moment when the Doctor figures it all out though. The idea of saving in a modern context wasn't something we could have conceptualized until relatively recently. Give a dead girl a break is a really great line and shows just how well restraint can work for a show like this. Not only is the Big River question mark not going to be answered for several years at this point, but it doesn't even give the Doctor the opportunity to elaborate on what he's just discovered because it just cuts straight back to Donna in VR. Cal's reaction to Miss Evangelista's explanation demonstrates a bitter truth that despite the audience's yearning for answers, the truth is that we don't actually want it. We don't want the roller coaster to be over. We don't want the episode to end. The truth starts to spread like wildfire, yet Donna can't let go of her concocted family. The red that's flooded her house was a great touch, as was Cal's ability to just zap her father and Dr. Moon out of existence. It's when the children start catching on to the truth that the real fear starts ramping up again, for they really are just strings of code. It's written so wonderfully, and these child actors do a cracking job too, right down to them vanishing right in front of Donna's eyes. Such surreal horror is taking place here, and their disappearance feels like another nod to Moffat's previous story, Blink. Sadly, I'm not entirely convinced by Tate's reaction to what's happening here, and it definitely felt like it went on for longer than needed. It's certainly preferable to the world collapsing in a more apocalyptic fashion, but I personally think the performance lets the scene down here. The Doctor and River make it down to the data core, and oh my god, it's blue down here. Lux's purpose in the expedition is then revealed as we see a child's face reveal itself on a statue. It feels so understandable and yet totally unforgivable what his grandfather did. This contradiction gives a really uneasy feeling about the whole scenario now, and yet the 4,000 lives, the crux of the story, still looms over it all like the gigantic orb of fire that Cal is hooked up to. With the humanoids attempting to save them, we have the final death of Anita, which is handled with excellence. The Doctor knew she was doomed from the start, and yet the Vashta Nerada had enough time to learn how to talk, firstly through Dave, and then through her. Instead of confusing the Vashta Nerada by tinting her visor, it gave them the perfect way to infiltrate the group. The fact there's no big dramatic indicator of her death makes it all the more ominous. To seal the deal, we get the most awesome bit of dialogue from the Doctor.
You just killed someone I like. That is not a safe place to stand. I'm the Doctor, and you're in the biggest library in the universe. Look me up.
And then it all floods back.
I've seen whole armies turn and run away.
It was foreshadowing, but of an event that came sooner than we could possibly imagine. My god, the script is awe-inspiring. Even after this statement of grandiosity though, River proves who's in charge here by knocking the Doctor out. This farewell scene is something else, man. How it starts off with a joke and ends with one of the saddest goodbyes ever was breathtaking. How the camera slowly zooms in on their faces, how River is literally wearing a crown of thorns. All this to identify the magnitude of her sacrifice and that she loved him. He and we are just left to reconceptualize everybody the Doctor has ever had as a companion. It was sad to see that Lee wasn't just an imaginary friend of Donna's, and I really liked that when the people returned, they were all dressed in black, as though the shadows had tainted them all without really knowing how or why. The Doctor placing the screwdriver and the diary where the pair began felt like the end. The music's typical of an ending, there's even narration over the top, and then he runs back to save her. It feels biblical as heck, but every goddamn element that brings this story to a close is so bloody perfect. David's performance.
Look at that! I'm very good!
The running, this beautiful shot, and the music. I don't even think she knew he was going to save her until I sat down to write the script for this video. I had never cried at this episode before. It is such a beautiful ending, and it does us one better by hearkening back to that one line at the end of Moffat's first two-parter back when Eccleston was the Doctor.
Everybody lives.
Everybody lives!
It feels so deserved that it makes me feel that every slightly negative or nitpicky thing I have to say about this story is so unwarranted because of the emotional climax the ending provides. Seeing David clicking his fingers to open the TARDIS as River puts the children to bed and finally sends a message not to the children in front of her, but to the children sat hiding behind their sofas.
Sweet dreams, everyone.
So, I can't even bring myself to ask the question. These episodes are sheer perfection, without a shadow of a doubt. So monumental, so influential, so emotional. This has to be my favourite story of the revival that I've reviewed thus far. Maybe, just maybe, this will give me a newfound respect for Moffat's era as showrunner.
Clara! No!
Or maybe not. I give Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead a 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching! There are currently 4 episodes of New Who that I have reviewed exclusively on Patreon. Make a pledge to support the channel today and you'll get to watch them. It's as simple as that. What do you think of these 2 episodes? Comment below or join us for a Benny on my Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion. Peach infused water. Oh.